The most shocking things the U.S. government kept secret. The Tuskegee syphilis study. I'm going to start with this one because, in my opinion, it is the most important and the most disturbing thing on this list, and I want to give it the space it deserves. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service launched a study in Tuskegee, Alabama. The stated purpose was to observe the natural progression of untreated syphilis in black men. They recruited 399 men who already had syphilis and 201 without it as a control group. They told the participants they were being treated for bad blood, a local term that covered various ailments. They were not being treated, they were being observed. When penicillin became the standard cure for syphilis in 1947, 15 years into the study, the researchers did not offer it to the participants. They actively worked to ensure participants did not receive treatment elsewhere. When some participants were drafted in World War II and identified as having syphilis, which meant they would have been treated automatically by the military, the researchers intervened to have them removed from the draft list, specifically to prevent treatment. The study ran for 40 years. 40 years. It ended in 1972 only because a whistleblower named Peter Buxton leaked the details to the press. By that point, 28 men had died directly from syphilis, 100 had died from related complications, 40 wives had been infected, and 19 children had been born with congenital syphilis. The U.S. government formally apologized in 1997. President Clinton delivered that apology. 8 of the original participants were still alive to hear it. The youngest of them was 87 years old. He had been in the study since he was a young man. That is the Tuskegee study.
Operation Paperclip.
Okay, so World War II ends. Germany is defeated. The Nazi regime is dismantled. The Nuremberg trials begin. War criminals are prosecuted. Justice is served. That's the story most people know. Here is the part most people don't know. At the same time Nuremberg was happening, the United States government was quietly recruiting Nazi scientists and bringing them to America, giving them new identities, giving them jobs, and in some cases, giving them security clearances. Operation Paperclip was a classified program run by the Office of Strategic Services, the predecessor to the CIA, that recruited over 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians after World War II. The most famous of them was Wernher von Braun. Von Braun was the lead engineer of the V-2 rocket program for Nazi Germany. The V-2 rockets were built using slave labor from concentration camps, prisoners who were worked to death building weapons. Von Braun knew this. There is documentation. After the war, he came to the United States under Operation Paperclip, became a NASA engineer, and was the lead architect of the Saturn V rocket that put Americans on the moon in 1969. He received the Presidential Medal of Freedom in 1977. The program was classified for decades. President Truman had explicitly ordered that anyone found to have been a member of the Nazi Party or an active supporter of Nazism was not eligible for the program. The Joint Intelligence Objectives Agency got around this by simply altering or omitting the relevant parts of the scientists' records before submitting them for approval. When this was uncovered decades later, the official position was essentially that the Cold War made it necessary. The alternative was letting the Soviets get them first, which is either a reasonable strategic argument or a deeply uncomfortable moral one. Probably both. You decide.
Operation Sea Spray.
Between 1949 and 1969, the U.S. military conducted a series of biological warfare experiments on American cities without the knowledge of the people living in them. The idea was to test how biological agents would spread through urban populations in the event of a Soviet attack. So they needed to know, if you release something into the air over a city, where does it go and how fast does it spread? Operation Sea Spray was one of the most notable of these programs. In 1950, the U.S. Navy used boats off the coast of San Francisco to spray the city with Serratia marcescens, a bacteria they believed at the time to be harmless, mixed with other substances. The spray covered 43 square miles of the city. An estimated 800,000 people were exposed without their knowledge. Shortly after the spraying, a cluster of patients began appearing at Stanford University Hospital with Serratia marcescens infections, a bacteria so rarely seen in clinical settings that doctors were genuinely confused by the sudden outbreak. At least one man died. His family later sued the government. The government successfully argued it could not be held liable for acts performed in the interest of national security. This was not an isolated incident. The Army conducted similar tests in New York City subway systems, releasing bacteria into the ventilation to track how it would spread through the tunnels. Tests were conducted over Minneapolis, over St. Louis, in residential areas, on highways. The program ran for 20 years. It was declassified in the 1970s. Area 51. I want to end with this one not because it is the most shocking on the list, but because it is the most interesting example of how government secrecy actually works in practice. For decades, Area 51 was one of the most famous conspiracy theory targets in America. People claimed it housed alien spacecraft, alien bodies, evidence of extraterrestrial contact. The government's response for most of that time was to officially deny that Area 51 even existed, which, when you have a giant military installation visible on maps and from roads, is a somewhat aggressive position to take. The CIA officially acknowledged Area 51's existence in 2013 through declassified documents, and the actual truth of what was happening there is in some ways more interesting than aliens. Area 51 was the testing ground for some of the most classified military aircraft in American history. The U-2 spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird, still one of the fastest aircraft ever built, capable of traveling at Mach 3.2. The A-12, aircraft so far ahead of anything publicly known that when civilian pilots reported seeing strange objects moving at impossible speeds in the Nevada sky, the government's preferred explanation was to let people assume they were seeing UFOs, rather than confirm the existence of classified aircraft programs. The UFO reports over Nevada in the 1950s and 1960s were largely explained by test flights of classified planes. The government knew this. They chose to allow the alien theory to circulate, rather than acknowledge what they were actually doing. Which means, and I want you to really sit with this, the US government actively allowed and in some cases encouraged UFO conspiracy theories as cover for classified military programs. The conspiracy was real. It just wasn't about aliens. It was about spy planes, which is simultaneously less exciting and somehow more disturbing.
So here's what I keep coming back to.
The Tuskegee study, Operation Paperclip, Operation Sea Spray, Area 51. Every single one was eventually confirmed, and almost never did anyone face legal consequences. Government secrecy doesn't look like a shadowy room with men in black suits. It looks like a filing cabinet, a classified stamp, a memo that says, let's not include that in the public report. It takes decades, leaks, and brave people to uncover. The things we don't know yet probably follow the same pattern. That's either a reason to be deeply worried or a reason to pay close attention. Probably both. If this made you want to read declassified government documents, give it a like and subscribe to Wait What for more every week. Check out the video on screen right now. And as always, wait, what?